Okay, so we're talking today about how you build cross-generational readiness for faster AI adoption. And it may seem that those two things aren't very related. Hopefully by the end of it, you'll see they are. We'll be both talking about the barriers to cross-generational readiness and actually how a lot of those barriers can be, to be honest, your best ally in fixing them at the same time. My name's James. We got a little nice animation from the marketing team there. So I'm the head of marketing at FormusPro, who I'll introduce in a second. Steve, do you want to just say hi and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, I'm Steve. So I'm our business development manager for the non-profit sector. So my background is kind of talking to a lot of non-profits and charities and understanding why they do what they do from a technology standpoint, what works well, what doesn't, and just spreading that knowledge across the industry, really.
See, now you're making me feel bad because I didn't give my background because I completely forgot. So I've done marketing my entire adult life, which, as you can, and I'm now looking at my camera, the white beard matching the white t-shirt, and I probably need to change that for the next call, is quite far too long. I've worked in the travel sector, I've worked in the medical sector, I've worked in the tech sector for the last 10 years. I run all our marketing, but also get called out to do a lot of our AI training for the non-profit sector, and again help run our AI Academy. It's a free resource which you can find on our website aimed at the non-profit sector and just talk about adoption. And time again, I'm sure, Steve, I'm sure you'll agree, we find that actually it's not the technology that's stopping AI adoption. It's what we call the hearts and minds problem. It's actually human psychology. Your staff and your volunteers that are some deliberately pushing back, others really want, are massively keen but just don't know where to start. And actually the last few of our webinars have focused on those topics. Just trying to remember back now and putting myself on the spot, but there was the importance of leadership.
Winning hearts and minds through AI adoption was another one.
Yeah,
it's all very topical for today as well.
Yeah, they can all be found on YouTube, and we will forward them all on to you as well. But just in brief, today we will just very quickly introduce ourselves. We'll give a quick thank you out to the TSI team who helped organise this and invite all you lovely people. We'll then start talking about the challenges for cross-generational readiness, and of course end it up with some practical solutions. So very quickly then, moving on, you're not here to talk about FormusPro or even the TSI team. You want to get to the good stuff. So FormusPro, we were founded back in 2012, and I always like to embarrass our founder Glenn here slightly. We were deliberately founded to chase the non-profit sector. He looked around at the time and realised that, and I'm not going to clearly mention any partners here, but a lot of partners were taking advantage of the non-profit sector, or at least not serving them as they should have been. Non-profit sectors were paying too much. It was a bit of a mess. And actually, I've been with FormusPro for just over 2 years now, and when I first interviewed, I was told by Glenn himself, look, there's only so much money one person needs, and everything else we make gets ploughed back into non-profit sort of discounts, much like Microsoft does as well. So all our rate cards are heavily discounted from the non-profit sector, and that was a company I wanted to work for. In fact, I think it's about 60% of our clientele is the non-profit. So we deliberately go out looking for non-profit clients like yourselves. And in fact, our first client, Anthony Nolan, the cancer charity, they've been with us for the last 13 years. They were our first client, and they still are now, although I will point out that isn't the same project. As I said, just a few of our clients, many of whom you deal with sort of directly, I believe, Steve.
Yeah, that's right. We've got some nice charity clients of ours on there, like Rethink Mental Illness, Anthony Nolan obviously being the first charity we work with. But then they all come in lots of shapes and sizes, non-profit. So we've got membership associations and regulatory bodies and organisations like that. Museums, heritage organisations, but yeah, these challenges and often the solutions are very similar, if not the same, across the board for non-profits. So hopefully a lot of what we cover today will be relevant to everyone, regardless of what type of non-profit you work for.
Absolutely. Microsoft's Technology for Impact team actually helped organise this for us, and we always give them a quick thank you each month. For those of you not aware, the Tech for Each Social Impact team sit under Microsoft Philanthropy. They're a separate department dedicated to the non-profit sector. They're going through some changes at the moment, and I don't know whether that's been announced publicly or not, so you may be some of the first to know. They are now going to be known as Microsoft Elevate, focusing on the non-profit sector and younger years education, which I think think I think those two fit into each other really well. But they are here, and the power to set up was to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. But they set it up as a non-profit themselves, so they're a separate arm within Microsoft, and every single penny that they make, every license they sell, every event they organize, every new non-profit that joins, that money gets plowed back into non-profit sector, either licensing discounts or developments, and this is the business model. They wanted to capacity build. They wanted to build a partner ecosystem for people like ourselves, deliberately sort of like looking after the nonprofit sector. But they wanted a social investment model, and that's why they exist, and it's why we work for them. The next two slides are slightly out of date. I think they ran out either this month or the end of June. But last year they granted 4.7 billion discounted software and services licenses. They donated over 250 million to the sector, and they're currently helping 377,000 non-profits around the world. Although, again, it's not enough. There's more we can do. There's more they can do, and we always will do. This is the slide. We'd normally send the slides out. When we do, I'll make sure you get a slightly updated version of this one, as I think this is just a month or two out of date. But I will point out, most of our commercial clients would give their right arm for the non-profit licensing fees that you guys can have access to. Bringing the power of AI to social impact organizations everywhere. That's our last TSI slide, and we will move now. I'm going to shut up slightly and let Steve talk a bit. Sorry, Steve. Let's start with what we actually want to get to is the challenge. So if we highlight what the issue is and what this webinar is about, and then we'll start talking about the practical applications. And as I said at the very start of this call, what's quite often something that is overlooked when we talk about digital transformation is people, especially in the nonprofit sector. A lot of money gets invested into licensing, into technology, and your staff and volunteers sometimes can be overlooked.
Yeah, it's easy to think that it's all about the technology, the new fancy tools, and the AI and dashboards and the reporting metrics and everything. But the reality is, transformation doesn't start with the tools or the tech stack. It starts with the people, and that's the bit you've got to get right first.
Yeah, especially in a non-profit. I mean, this applies to everyone, but especially in a non-profit, your staff are going to be massively diverse. They're going to come from different backgrounds, different comfort levels with technology. They may well be, I mean, I've put this on here with Gen Alphas and baby boomers and actually it was weird when I was creating this slide because I found out everybody had a very slightly different definition of what the generation was. So I keep bouncing back between Gen X and Millennial, Gen X and Millennial, and Gen X sounds much cooler, but there we go. I'd much rather be Gen Z or Gen Alpha, but I have little choice on that, unfortunately. But with a non-profit, you'll find a lot of your volunteers may well be still baby boomers. They may be 61 to 79, but then some of your staff could well be in their early 20s, and that's a huge generational sort of bridge to cross.
It exacerbates the gap between the different generations in terms of how they've built their careers as well and what they're used to in the world of work. So you've got like long-serving staff who their careers are built on relationships and trust and consistent delivery, whereas you've got younger team members that have grown up with tech and are much more digitally literate than the older generation, then they'll expect these things just to work. So there's quite big mindset differences. But one thing I think we will talk about is how you can actually use that as an advantage a bit later on and almost bridge that gap and use those differences as strengths.
And it's not just about the staff, it's about your volunteer layer as well. So critical to so many non-profit organizations, but volunteers more than anyone else have got limited or no time to spare for learning new systems. And that mix, it's that creates the non-profit challenge that's really unique when you're trying to roll out any kind of AI at all. And a lot of the AI that the non-profit sector is talking about at the moment is generative AI, which I'm sure you've come across. ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini. I'm not going to sort of go through and list them all, but actually the non-profit sector is already behind the curve slightly. So if you're now looking to, and this is just because technology is going so fast, if you're now looking to implement generative AI and see how that fits in your non-profit, it's not out of date. Generative AI is still huge and only getting bigger. Copilot, across the Microsoft stack is amazing, but actually there's a lot of the commercial sector that's now talking about agentic AI, and that's AI that can make a decision. So generative AI, you may say, okay, I'm putting on an event, can you write an event description for me? Agentic AI was like, oh, you're putting on an event, right? I'm just going to go off and book a hall, and then I'm going to send out a bunch of emails, and then I'm going to order some swag so you can give stuff away and make sure the catering's ordered. Bing, all done for you. How's that sound? And that's a very loosey-goosey definition, but this is just to show how quick AI is advancing. And this is why the technology, the big challenge isn't whether technology can do what you need it to, because it absolutely can. It's whether your people are ready and willing and able to take that leap. And that's hopefully, I say touch wood, what we're here for today.
Why does all this matter now, and why can't this conversation wait anymore? Why have we put this webinar together to talk about this to you all?
Absolutely. The genie is well and truly out of the bottle. And whether you agree with AI on a fundamental societal level, from a generational perspective, from a moral aspect, and actually there are elements of that, especially for non-profits, it is here. Your competitors will be using it. And if you're in the non-profit space, you know how noisy that space is. There's only so much money that the public can donate. There's only so many grants you can claim, unfortunately. And there's a lot of non-profits out there. If you're not using it, I guarantee you, and competitor may be the wrong word, but people that are bidding on the same donations that you need, they are using it. And it's just changing how everyone works.
I think competitor is almost the right word nowadays, though, because of all the kind of economic developments over the last 5 years. Non-profits are having to be more competitive versus others. And,
it is the right word. It absolutely is. I just don't like using it because I'm used to thinking about the non-profit as the sort of the moral sector that I really like working with, and competitor just feels really commercial. So I need a better word for it. But yeah, you are right. There's only so much money that can go around, unfortunately. But, and it's a big but, if your people aren't ready to adopt AI, if they can't see the benefits, it's not whether about AI can help your organization or not. It's about whether your teams are actually going to let you benefit from it. Because it's all well and good you paying for 30 Copilot licenses. If it sits there unused, you've just wasted the money.
Yeah, there's the one side of it, which is the risk of losing out on efficiency versus maybe other non-profits, or versus where you want to be. But there's also the risk of disengagement and frustration and burnout from staff and volunteers. And that's arguably the more important part, because you're forever going to miss out on efficiency if people just are not adopting your tools. So I think, people feel overwhelmed, excluded from the change. That impacts morale, staff retention. And if you think about it, other non-profits, if they are really far ahead with their technology and AI journeys, these disingenuated staff members, they leave, they might join another organization, a stereotypically younger person who maybe has grown up with tech, and the use of tech is important to them in an organization. They might join a non-profit who's a bit further ahead and who can give them those tools that they are used to, maybe in their personal lives.
And suddenly your recruitment costs go up, volunteer acquisition costs go up. But there is a flip side to that, just turning it on its head. If you do get it right, if you do bring the right people on your AI journey with you, the digital tools, the AI, Copilot, they are genuine enablers of your mission delivery. They let you work faster, more inclusive and more impactful. And actually, Steve, I'm really glad you mentioned burnout, because that's the subject. That was the subject that I was trying to remember for our last but one webinar. And it was actually how to prevent volunteer burnout and staff burnout with AI. So we will send you that link as well.
Yeah, but I think that the big thing is it's not just a tech conversation. It's not just a people conversation. It's a leadership conversation. There's so many moving parts here. And I think we all have to, it's about obviously collaborating and coming together. But I think there's a lot of biases and ways of working that a lot of us have been stuck with for a long time, that we need to be open to being flexible and innovating and trying new things around, I think.
Yeah, completely agree. Now, Heads up, the next slide is a little scary because it's about barriers to adoption, and there is a lot of barriers there. And me and Steve are going to break them down. What I will point out is actually most of these barriers can also be assets. So I don't want you there going, oh my God, there's so many problems there. I might as well not bother. But unclear digital baselines, generational divides in tech comfort, lack of clear AI leadership. I'm not going to read them all out. You can see the screen. But let's actually dig into what actually gets in the way when you're trying to roll out this technology, especially if I'm referring to AI for a nonprofit.
Yeah, so starting with probably the obvious one, generational divides, especially in non-profits. Similar with like government organisations, we tend to find there's people who have been there their entire careers, and there's a lot of people that are new. There's very different stages of careers across staff. Some are obviously naturally more comfortable using AI, and others are more cautious. Some of the older generation can be more cautious, some of the younger generation, so it can really be subjective depending on the person. And that then links directly to the cultural resistance to change, which is another barrier we've got here. So some team members, they might see new technology as disruptive rather than as an opportunity. And it's easy to just go back to, this is the way we've always done things, which is a phrase that I hear all the time, especially if past changes and projects haven't landed very well, which is another thing we see quite a lot. Go back to the original point of why FormusPro was founded. If an organization, if a technology supplier doesn't necessarily care about how the technology lands and if the people use it to its fullest extent, that creates a bad impression of technology within your organization.
When I started in marketing, my first director had a phrase, and it was, if you always do the things you've always done, you're always going to get the things you've always had. You can't grow if you don't try new things. But when we talk about cross-generational readiness, and Steve will tell you, as a marketer, I am obsessed with human psychology. I don't think you can be a good marketing unless you have a good grasp on why people do stuff. There was a study done a few years ago. They actually put people and scanned their brains and had them learn new things. And what they found is once you hit sort of middle age and sort of like 40 plus, as much as I hate referring to that as middle age, and apologies to anybody else on the call in that, but what they found was when they asked somebody over the age of 40 to learn something new, they had the exact same mental reaction as a person of any age being punched in the face. Now, I'm not quite sure how they ran that study or learned that or what their test samples were like, but it's interesting that actually our brains react the same way. The older we get, the harder it is to learn new things, especially technology. And you have to take that into account, especially with your workforce. Your volunteer workforce. Volunteers are essential, but they don't have the time, and they probably are. A lot of volunteers are people that have the time to volunteer. They're not going to be 20 who are just going to take to AI like ducks to water. They're going to be older. They're going to have more time. So you need to factor how you teach that kind of person and that psychology profile, that persona, how you teach them AI, how you bring them along on the journey. Without overwhelming them, right?
Very true. Yeah, there's that fear of overwhelm that is more pressing, I think, for volunteers typically, because like you say, they've got less time to spend on this sort of stuff. But obviously it applies to everyone. I think it's a very valid concern that a lot of us are hearing a lot is, am I going to be left behind? Will I be expected to learn too much too fast? And then there's also mission overload, where I think people start to lose sight of the mission of the charity or the non-profit because their head is so deep in admin every day and trying to learn new tools without much guidance. So you can quite easily lose sight of why you started working for the organization in the first place.
And the boogeyman under the bed, or the elephant in the room, if you prefer, with AI, is actually, do I want my nonprofit to adopt AI? Because I don't want to lose my job, particularly amongst your more experienced staff. I'm using that as a sort of like an analogy for your older staff. We're going to go with more experienced staff. AI can be viewed as not as a support tool, but as something that's just going to make them redundant. And nobody is ever going to go, well, yeah, this is really great for the business, but it's going to make me redundant, so I'm going to push it through. That doesn't happen, and it will create a ridiculous amount of resistance that you need to plan for and overcome.
And I think a lot of that starts at leadership level.
Yep.
So if there's a lack of clear leadership in general, but say around AI, there's no leadership vision that's clear around AI, and leaders aren't explaining how it fits into the mission and the bigger picture, people can quite easily become disengaged. So it's paramount to lead by example. If you want your staff and volunteers to adopt AI, you better adopt AI too, and you better be the test bed for some of these early use cases then.
Sorry, Steve. Yeah, you're right. I was just smiling at a question. In my church, we have baby boomers and Gen X volunteers who have a genuine fear of AI, trying to share the Christian faith to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, who are trying to live in it. My fear is that the avoidance or misuse of AI will break an already fragile communication link. Can we create a playground environment where we can have fun regardless of age and have each generation teach other without intimidation? You absolutely can. And Steve, we'll get to that point briefly. I don't want to sort of like jump backwards and forwards between slides, but we're talking about the sort of the barriers to adoption. But actually, yeah, that playground environment is part of this, and actually part of the solution is making this fun.
I was going to say, right? It's like they've seen our next slides already.
Yeah, you're skipping ahead too far there. But yeah, it is just about bringing everyone along on the journey and making this fun. So we have talked about the barriers. Let's flip that on the head. Let's talk about the opportunities and actually where AI can really just help you. And I hate the word empowering your mission. It's so corporate, but let's find out how AI can empower your mission.
So thinking about the cross-generational workforce as an asset rather than a hurdle is one of the first things I think that you should incorporate within your planning for all this stuff. And different people in different generations and different people within the same generational bracket bring a lot of different strengths to the table. So, I mean, typically younger team members might be more naturally tech savvy, but your older staff and volunteers will bring that patience, wisdom, but also the context. I think it's easy for younger or more professionally inexperienced people to jump on whatever trend looks great, but perhaps more experienced generations can rein them in a bit and say, hang on, that looks like a fad, whereas this looks great, let's focus more on this. And you could kind of the alignment thing. So there's a lot of skills that can be brought together across all your different people to kind of turn it into a real positive force collectively.
First of all, Steve, I'm going to object to you calling me either patient or wise because I'm still 19. I am 19 at heart and proud of it. But the way I would sort of place that is your younger staff will probably know how to use the tech. Some of your more experienced staff will know why you should be using the tech. It's a good way, I think, to frame it. Yeah. And actually a big part of it is how and we've done webinars on how to implement AI through a leadership strategy. We will send you those links, but it's about fostering a culture of shared learning and curiosity, sort of getting back to the question in the chat. So instead of trying to push through an adoption just because I've said you have to do this, make it fun. Bring on AI ambassadors, bring on AI sort of advocates that are just going to champion this for you. Frame AI not as a threat or a mandate, but as something that can be explored together. Whenever I'm doing some prompting training, now I could just load up ChatGPT and say, right, today we're going to learn how to prompt. But actually it's quite fun to load up something like Microsoft Designer and say, right, I want you all to create this image. Who can get the closest? And then you can break down people's prompts and show who got, and there's no reason you can't do that on a bit of a lunch and learn. And yeah, you can all be doing it and you can all share your screen and just turn it into a bit of a joke, but it's not. It has serious real world implications as you're teaching people how to prompt and you're showing them that actually generative AI can be really useful for their roles.
Something we often say on these webinars and to our clients and to anyone, any non-profit we're trying to give some guidance to, is create safe spaces for experimentation. One thing we talk about a lot is not being afraid to fail. And it's actually a good thing, especially with AI, where there's so many probably unexplored use cases. You're
fail safe, fail fast.
Yeah, and I think to kind of more directly answering that question we got, you definitely can create like a sandbox environment with Microsoft Copilot. You could do something like separate it off from everything else, but one SharePoint folder where you put a load of previously successful grant applications in there and get your staff to use the AI tool to draft a really compelling grant application based on a fictional bucket, basically. Little things like that. It's totally safe. Data's not going anywhere. They're seeing the tangible benefit in relation to their actual job role. And just little groups like that, like James said, lunches and learns, create sort of sandbox trial scenarios like that are relevant to people's roles, and just let them run away with it and tell, maybe at the end of it, everyone has to say one success they experienced and one failure they experienced, for example.
Normalize it, let them shout about their successes, and actually shout about their successes yourself. Get people used to trying and failing and learning and sharing, and that's how you're going to build people's confidence. And then confidence starts to drive momentum, and momentum will drive adoption, because they're going to see that they used it once and it was super useful. They're not going to then compartmentalize that away and go, well, yep, I can see that for grant management that was super useful, and I'm just going to use AI for that and nothing else. They can then go, I wonder if I can use it here, or if I. But it's having those different generations talking and teaching and showing each other that actually makes it really meaningful for their entire work.
And there's a wider opportunity to adopting this kind of cultural shift as well. The opportunity in front of us is getting people using AI, but the wider one is building a culture where people of all ages, backgrounds, mindsets feel empowered to adapt or to question the norm or to grow together. And I think you're an advantage where some of that negative impression about maybe failed IT projects in the past, although that will have some residual effect, AI, I think, is seen as different enough to get people interested in these new ways of working without so much looking back into past failures. And then that will give you the platform so that you've rolled out AI, but now you've got this really inclusive training and learning culture. Then when you implement the next tool, people will remember, oh, well, actually, we did it that way. The AI rollout worked really well. So everyone will be more bought in to future stuff that you do. So it's a real knock-on effect.
And talking about wider opportunities, this isn't just about AI. Actually implementing this kind of culture is just good for culture in general, because your different sort of ages, your different backgrounds are suddenly working a lot closer together if you are sort of pushing these advocates. All right, but we've talked about the people. We have to obviously talk about the tech a little bit because we're a Microsoft partner. Why would we not? So we consult and then we actually deploy these sort of things. So we've covered sort of people, mindsets, culture. The Microsoft technology stack is perfect for building AI adoption, and this is kind of what it looks like at the moment. We're not going to go through the whole thing there because the Microsoft tech stack is huge. We do encourage you to either reach out to ourselves or another Microsoft partner. As long as you're benefiting the world, we're happy for your success. It doesn't have to be through us, but there's a lot here that's been specifically designed with AI in mind, and not just with where in the technology AI can be used, but also actually making it super easy for people to adopt.
Yeah, one of the big misconceptions, I think, about obviously technology, but AI and digital transformation overall is that it's only for the tech savvy.
Nope,
and that really couldn't be. Yeah, exactly. You're proof of that. I
can say it. You can't.
But yeah, it's honestly couldn't be further from the truth. It's the Microsoft, the way they're kind of moving with all this technology is low code, no code. Get rid of the need to have, software developers that have spent 5 years at college and 10 years in their professional development lives. Like, it's simple drag and drop interfaces, and they've designed Copilot to nicely fit in with all of that. So yeah, in fact, the way it's going is that the less tech savvy you are, the more likely in years to come you will be able to grasp these tools and technologies more easily.
Yeah, it's natural language. The older you are, probably the better your writing is, he says in a really broad category, wincing at the generalizations he's making. But yeah, the whole point about low code, no code AI is you don't need to be tech savvy. You just need to be able to describe something and be quite verbose with your typing. Google searches are an interesting one. Previously, when people would do a Google search, you might be lucky to get restaurants near me. Marketers like myself built a whole ecosystem around SEO, which is appearing in search listings for restaurants near me. These days, people will sit down in front of sort of Copilot, ChatGPT, and go, right, I'm hungry. I want to go out about 7 o'clock tonight, but I don't really know what I want. These are the kind, and they'll actually talk to it like a person, and actually you'll find your older generations are probably much better at using the AI than others. And that's the big picture. So if you do work in the nonprofit sector, you may already be using some of these tools. You may already have Dynamics. You may already have the Power Platform. You may be using no-code, low-code apps. You've probably all got Teams, given that you're on this sort of call. But actually, you may not be using the AI that is embedded into these tools now, and that's where people like me and Steve come along and are happy to sort of speak to you for free and go, look, if you just click that button, you can enable it, and this is how you start teaching your teams.
That, I think you can start slow and start small that way, and then move towards that sort of inclusion by design model.
Yeah.
If you think about AI features that help people with neurodiverse needs, like making interfaces more simple, or giving you natural language step-by-step guidance on how to use a feature or how to find something in a system. It's got a lot of built-in accessibility tools for people with visual impairments or language barriers, but I think that kind of accessibility thing is also being redefined a little bit, because it's being designed in a way that no matter who you are, or where you're from, or how old you are, Microsoft are incorporating a lot of features that are universal and just universally make everyone's lives easier through the way that you interact with Copilot and the other tools.
Yeah, and I'm assuming everybody in the non-profit sector on this call sort of understands accessibility. It's probably a big part of what you do, but what Microsoft are trying to do at the moment, and doing really well, it's not accessibility as we know it and what we've referred to it previously in the traditional sense. The direction they're trying to take, as well as bringing that old accessibility along, is also making sure that the tools are usable by people at very different levels of digital comfort. So the AI that's now embedded within these platforms, it's not hidden behind layers of complexity that you just go, no, I'm not having anything to do with that. It's there right front and center for anybody to use with absolutely no technical expertise at all. You almost just need to give them permission to get started.
Yeah, and I'm having a lot of conversations with non-profits at the moment about where to get started with AI, because there's two questions. It's the first is my data safe, and how do I use it in a context where we're not going to risk leaking any sensitive information? But the other side of it is like, what do we even start with? What is going to generate a return on investment that we can then take to the leadership and say, right, it's given us this much of a return, let's now expand our use of AI further. And it's a good way to think in terms of new technology, but I'm finding it's a bit of a hindrance to non-profits actually starting to use AI. So I think, to your point, James, a good place to start is just turn it on in Outlook, for example. Get it to summarize an email chain that you've not had time to read, that would take you like 10 minutes to sit through and familiarize yourself with. Get it to draft emails in a formal tone. Get it to pull. I love using it in Teams, because I've missed a Teams group chat all day, and I just click Copilots, please summarize the last 5 hours, and then I know what my next actions are. And I shouldn't have told you that, James, of all the unread messages that
most of our chats are probably going to summarize down to 0 when you realize we've just been waffling all day. But actually, it's a really good point, sort of going back to sort of the human psychology. Again, should I say this to the non-profit sector, but humans at a very basic level can be a little bit selfish internally. But actually, if you show the benefit of AI through how you're going to save their time, how you're going to simplify their workload, how you're going to make their lives easier. So you're not pitching AI as this is good for the mission, this is good for non-profits. It's very much this is good for you. It becomes a benefit, not a burden.
And your return on investment is then not necessarily how many processes can we automate with AI. It's more about how much time has AI freed up for people so that they can actually do more impactful stuff. Then measure your ROI based on how much more mission-related activity your staff and volunteers can carry out, because their head is not stuck in admin and emails all day.
That's where AI starts to stick completely. Practical strategies in mixed comfort environments. So let's get really practical. And this diagram has been deliberately done like this because this needs to be a feedback loop. It's not a do once and done. It's constantly go around this loop. Going with the right mindset and having the right tools is great. It's absolutely the start, but you're still going to need a strategy for rolling this out to your team, especially when everyone isn't in the same place.
You've got people who will be excited to dive in. That's the thing. I find people who are excited about AI are really excited about AI and want to use it in every way they possibly can. And then obviously you've got others that sometimes they feel like they've only just got comfortable with the last system that you introduced to your nonprofit.
Yeah.
And that is normal. That's stuff that we see. I don't think there's a nonprofit where I haven't seen that kind of disparity or divide. And so the main question there is, how do you actually bring everyone along and make sure that you're not leaving certain people behind?
Yeah. And actually just sticking up for the older generation here, classing myself in as this, just again taking a weird little segue, something that I found speaking to a lot of apprenticeships at the moment, and speaking to a lot of younger staff coming out of school, which your volunteers may be, or some of your younger, there's actually a pushback amongst younger generations against AI. It's not necessarily your young staff are very tech savvy, they know what to do, and your older staff aren't. It's not that simple, which is why we talk about how you have to assess readiness levels, because a lot of people come out of school or college or university going, AI is bad. We've been told never to use AI, or actually AI is not bad, but I've never been trained how to use it, because schools are very anti-AI. My son, he's 15, he hates AI, won't use it, and I've told him how many times it will make his life easier, but it's stealing artists' work. And that's a perfectly good argument against AI. There is perfectly good moral reasons for that, which is where you need to assess your own profits needs. But it's also where I say the genie's kind of out of the bottle with this. And I've tried to explain to him that he doesn't necessarily know everything at 15, and when he enters the workforce, people are going to expect him to know how to use AI, and which is why I'm trying to teach him. But he's not really listening, because what 15-year-old does. But the point I'm making here is it's not as clear cut as tech savvy, not tech savvy, but wise. It's actually, you need to assess those digital readiness levels. And once you have, you need to then create a clear picture of where everyone is and actually document that, because you're going to need to change it as you go forward. So you need to be able to measure their confidence with digital tools, their openness to AI, even their current pain points. Document that so you can actually refer back to it over time and measure growth. That there is your baseline. So you're not just guessing, because guessing will far too often involve Gen Z, good, Gen X, bad. And actually, it's not that simple.
To give an example of assessing readiness levels as well, one thing that we do with our technical teams, which I think would be a good model for this, is James said earlier, there's a huge number of tools and technologies that Microsoft offer for organizations. And we service nonprofits using a lot of these tools and modules, not all of them. But because there are so many, we've got very diverse and different skill sets within our organization, within the technical team. So we've got a skills matrix that we keep up to date. So it might be Microsoft Dynamics, you'd mark yourself as a 5 out of 10, but Power BI, you'd mark yourself as a 9 out of 10. And someone might be the opposite way round. So if we have a project that comes up involving Power BI, look at the skills matrix. And these are numbers and ratings that people provide about themselves based on their comfortability and experience with the tool. And like James said, we'll keep updating this, we'll constantly review it so that it's always up to date. And that, for something like this, just a little trick like that, it makes people feel more engaged. You're not telling them what you think they're good at, they're telling you what they think they're good and comfortable with. That's just a small thing that could help, I think.
Oh, definitely. It's where that blended learning really comes into its own. You're not relying on a one size fits all. This isn't stick everybody in front of a chalkboard and start talking to them. You need to offer a mix, because different people are going to react in different ways. So live sessions for those who benefit from interaction and Q&As, on-demand resources for self-paced learners, peer champions or digital advocates I'm a huge fan of, but you can actually sort of go down the digital buddy route route for ongoing informal support. So once you've got this skill matrix, you can almost see who's on opposite ends of the different stuff, because it's not a binary thing. It should be almost a square or an octagon. And for people you find that somebody's really good here, but then on the opposite, buddy them up, let them benefit from each other.
And those sorts of peer groups, sort of support structures, they can often be a bit of a game changer, because some people might not want to raise their hand in front of a big group, or might not want to speak up. I'm not putting you in that category, James. And so they'll happily ask one of their colleagues over.
Feel the love on this call.
And so I think, we need to recognise that. And for some people, a peer group or a buddy system, that might be all they need to start gaining the confidence to actually have their ideas heard. And then they can share their ideas in a wider forum once they feel more comfortable with that. So that's another little technique I think that would be useful.
Oh, Stephen, I'm not going to call you out by non-profit or surname in the chat, but that's a fantastic comment. I remember when we were trying to learn emojis and text messaging lingo. Will you share an AI lingo cheat sheet? We absolutely will. Although if you follow FormusPro online, or myself or Steve online, we use this quite often. Actually, we can actually provide some training for you as well, which we'll get to at the end of this call. But yeah, I remember trying to figure out, is laugh out loud, what laugh out loud, is that lots of love? And actually this is going to really date me. When I first started back in the internet in the early 90s, LOL didn't mean laugh out loud, it meant lots of love, and then it sort of morphed. But I got really confused for a long time, and there was unfortunately a death in the family, and I ended an email with lol, and the meaning had completely changed without me knowing. But there we go. But if you follow this kind of approach, this is how you build trust. You teach everybody in their own time, in their own way. Somebody's laughing at me in the chat. But it doesn't just build trust, which is what we've been talking about. It builds resilience in your nonprofit, because everybody is growing together, and that's what drives your long-term success with any digital transformation, not just AI adoption. It's that resilience, so that once you've got the basics for this, when agentic AI suddenly becomes a thing for you, you're all ready to tackle it. When AI becomes sentient and actually then is working for you, so you already are ready to tackle it, because you've built in that learning culture of resilience.
That's it. But none of these things work without the other, do they? So you've got to make it approachable and fun, but you've also got to do the boring, assess everyone's readiness level, make sure that what you're saying is resonating with everyone.
So how to build a culture of digital curiosity. Steve, I know this is a passion of yours. So do you want to start this one off?
Yeah, I've looked at a lot of strategies for supporting different levels of comfort with AI and digital tools, because it's like, this is a very prudent topic, but it's hard to actually take that to the practical solutions for these things. So just going a little bit bigger picture, thinking about how we build a workplace where people actually want to engage with the technology and where curiosity is a part of the culture. How do we get there?
That absolutely needs to be first. It's so important, because lasting adoption, it doesn't come from policies, it doesn't come from a checklist, it doesn't come from a mandate. It's the mindset that I say leadership has created. It does need to come from the top, but it's from the mindset that everybody has created within that nonprofit. If your staff and your volunteers are naturally curious, if they're comfortable with asking the questions and experimenting, you've already won, I say half the battle, you've already won the battle.
That ties in very nicely to a lot of the projects that I've seen over the years, like software implementation projects, and when you're managing the business change aspect of it, when people need to change their processes and lose their ways of working they've been wedded to for the last however long. You get the detractors, the people with the loudest voices saying the most negative things about the project, and those are the people that need just a little mindset shift, and all of a sudden they're your biggest supporters. And then so it'll be the same with AI, and you get a lot of skeptics, but you can move that skepticism to experimentation. And once you do, you see Bob, who was really, really anti-AI, has actually just started using it. And why is Bob using it when he hates it? Maybe I should then start using it, because I don't hate AI as much as Bob. And it's just bringing people along in slightly different ways. Yeah,
that's actually a really good point. It's not about forcing anyone to become a tech expert, because that's not going to happen. If somebody doesn't have a left brain, right brain type switch, you're not going to ever train somebody to be a tech expert. What you're instead trying to do is foster small, everyday habits of curiosity. You want to encourage your sort of volunteers and your staff and your leaders to say, I wonder if there's a quicker way to do this. So it's moving away from that, well, we've always done it this way, why would we change? It's to, right, well, we're doing this today. I wonder if AI can fix this. Could AI help me with that? Is there a better way to do this? Is there an easier way to do this? Is there a more ethical way to do this? And AI, and actually what's weird about AI is actually once you start adopting it, you can ask the AI that questions as well. And you can put in, this is what I'm doing today. Should I be doing this? Is there a better way to do it? And almost use it as a sounding board backwards and forwards. But you need to be comfortable with AI in the first place before you can start that process.
I like that. That is one of the biggest things that's changed my use of AI is ask the AI what you should be asking it. And that, I think, will help encourage that cross-generational
very meta,
mentoring.
But it's very useful.
For the cross-generational mentoring side of it, the way that typically older generations interact with, say, services, they're used to calling up companies when they have an issue rather than talking to a chatbot, for example. So their natural inclination is to ask the AI tool questions as if it is a human. So I think that would help bridge that cross-generational gap a bit more if people, as a default, started asking AI, what should I be prompting you with to achieve this outcome that I want? Take on the persona of the recipient of this grant application I've written and critique the grant application based on what you're looking for, and then tell me how to improve my grant proposal based on your critique. So it's just it can do a lot of the work for you, and it can, if you're not feeling that creative, it can almost just instill that creativity in the way that you prompt it.
And actually, just a really small tip there, it does make your office seem a little bit strange, but Copilot definitely has it. ChatGPT definitely has it. I think some of the others have it as well. You don't have to type stuff out. You can actually talk to your AI. You can name it. I'm a bit of a Star Trek geek, so I've called mine Computer, but it means that I can log in the morning and go, okay, Computer, this is what I'm doing today. How would you do it? What's the best way to achieve this? What's the best? And you'll actually come across, and you could walk into your nonprofit tomorrow and find some of your staff just talking to their computer. And it may seem really bizarre, but this is where we start talking about those little changes, those little wins, that momentum building when somebody starts talking to their Copilot like a real person, treating it like a Copilot. When somebody automates a task for the first time, or they use a Copilot to summarize a complex document, that confidence just soars. And then leadership needs to celebrate that. You need to capitalize on it fast. You need to share those stories so that momentum starts building with other people.
Celebrate the wins, and then that's another crucial point, is linking digital curiosity to your mission.
Something you say that 3 times fast, please?
No, absolutely not. That's something that we briefly touched on earlier, but I think relating all this stuff back to your mission is also an unfair advantage you have as a non-profit against commercial organizations, because people are working for you partly or wholly because of your mission.
They want to. It's not a salary, it's not a wage.
When staff and volunteers can see how AI can help not just their own personal lives and day jobs, but how it can fulfill the goals of the mission and contribute towards how effectively they can deliver on that mission, curiosity itself then becomes mission driven, and people will feel an obligation to be curious and creative.
That's a good word there, obligation, but it's complete. I think that's key, and I think it's probably key to this entire thing. When you can remove the thought of AI as admin, as technology, as something that I have to do, but actually link it to purpose and impact, to making a real world difference, they are far more likely to lean in and want to explore. It stops being about gadgets and starts becoming about, well, actually, I'm using AI to do X, with X being your mission.
And then once that curiosity has taken hold, it can, it's that cycle again. It becomes self-sustaining, and it's not just good for AI adoption, then it's good for all your other adoption of all your new processes and systems, because then you're more in that mindset as an organization. So that's how I think we build readiness for this, but also momentum, which is extremely important, and resilience. All those things tied together. If you start just letting people know that they can be curious and they can fail without repercussion, and they'll actually be celebrated for it, you can turn on a lot of those other positive switches.
Curiosity, momentum, resilience. If you remember nothing else from this webinar, remember those three. So before we leave, if you do reach out to Steve, we can organise something called AI in a Day for you. Now, there is a small cost to this. It's about £1,000. I was going to say pounds there. It's about $1,000. But it's great for non-profits. And what we'll actually do is come and install an AI, I almost want to say an AI culture in a day. So unfortunately, you're going to get me or somebody like me doing about a half day's training. And we really will cover the basics there. The difference between generative AI, agentic AI, AGI, which is the Skynets and the Terminators of the world that we don't need to worry about for a while. We'll also talk about prompting and how the best to prompt, how to talk to AI, how to use it and be useful. But what we'll also do is we'll set up a SharePoint for you, and we'll put in a little bit of the power. We'll use Copilot Studio. We'll put in a little Power Automate for you, and what we'll do is we'll put a chatbot pointing at all your data, completely protected, doesn't go outside of your organization at all, but your staff can then interrogate Copilot about everything that's in your data, whether that be Excel spreadsheets, whether it be tone of voice documents, and actually you're there using AI in a day, and that momentum starts to build for actually what's quite a low cost. You don't want to pay that kind of price. We absolutely understand it, but we did want to give something to everybody on this call for free. There's FlexCRM. If any of you are currently using a CRM, ours is free. I say it's free. That's a lie, isn't it, Steve? It's free to the non-profit sector. Everybody else has to pay. But if you want to save yourself a bit of a cost, if you're currently shopping around for CRM, we'll provide the link in the email. That's absolutely free to download. But we've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to stop talking and I'm just going to hover on this slide and say, look, if you want to connect with me, if you want to connect with Steve, with my marketing hat on, if you want to follow FormusPro online, please do. You've got your QR codes there. If there's any questions and answers while you've got me and Steve about, now is the time to ask them. I promise you we'll try and do our best to answer them all for you. But if you do want to reach out to me or Steve or FormusPro, great. If not, you'll get an email with this in. Please forward it round. Please reach out. We are here to help. And hopefully we'll speak to you all on the next webinar, which is next month. And it's actually going to be ready-made personas. A lot of actually put together with AI, but I think we cover 17 different donor personas, and you can just how to target them with your different marketing automation tools. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Yep. Speak to you all soon. Thanks all.